Welcome to Food Tech Simplified. This is Areeb Irshad, and we are starting off a new series that is on food safety, FSS Act, rules and regulations. This is going to be a long series and it's going to be ongoing for some time. And in this particular video, we are going to cover food safety. Basically, this is the chapter 1, which is food safety, FSS Act, rules and regulations, and we are covering food safety particularly in this video. Okay, this video is relevant for the students who are preparing for food safety officer exam, but also for any general exam. It could be technical officer exam which involves food safety, or any exam. It could be ICAR net exam, and it will act as more of a summary of a chapter of a topic. Because if you are let's say in the first year, or maybe you don't have any idea about what food safety is or what FSSAI is, we are not going to explain them in a lot of detail, because this is supposed to be a summary. This is supposed to be a revision session. Food safety. So why is it important? First of all, we have to understand why are we even studying it. It's important. Yes, it's an important issue to be handled, not only at a national level but also at a global level. But why is it important? So food safety, of course, is important to prevent microbes and contaminants. So we said microbes is a different entity and contaminants is a different entity, and we are going to talk about contaminants as well in a bit. And basically, we want to avoid the harmful substances. It could be microorganisms that could cause foodborne illness, or some contaminants that could also cause a potential health threat to the consumers. And this is the essence of food safety if you think about it, and that is why it's important. So as you can see, the microbes and the contaminants, they cause diseases, which I just talked about, and not only they cause diseases, but they can also destroy nutrients, which is, of course, this is not good for the food. And if for example, if we are eating food, it's supposed to make us healthy, it's supposed to be nutritious, and if it is destroying nutrients, then it is not serving the purpose of being a food. So that is why a lot of people call it that if a food is not safe, it is not food. And so basically, every year millions of people fall ill because of the unsafe food that they consume on a daily basis or on a yearly basis. And the people who usually get affected are the people who belong from poor families, or basically huge populations in the developing countries. And basically the people whose health is fragile. This is fragile. I'm not sure if you are able to understand the handwriting, but this is fragile. Fragile health, and especially the infants and elderly, because their immune system isn't as strong, and that is why they get impacted more when compared to the adults, or more when compared to the young people. Now, you might have observed that there is a star mark on contaminants, and that is for a reason, because for food contaminants to enter into the supply chain of the food, there are a lot of opportunities. Okay, so basically, for food contamination to take place, there are a lot of opportunities, and these opportunities could look like this. So I'm gonna just quickly. So first of all, the farm production. At the farm production level, if the food is not handled properly, and this will be covered, I think, in Good Agriculture Practices, GAP in short. So if the agricultural practices are not good, so at the farm level, some microbes or contaminants, because we are talking about contaminants, some contaminants can enter into the food at the primary level, at the production level. And that is why farm production is one thing. And next, when it moves to harvesting, when someone is harvesting, the farmers are harvesting, and it's not just about the vegetarian food, but also about the non-vegetarian food. Maybe a fisherman or a fisherwoman is capturing some fishes or some crabs, or someone is slaughtering chicken, for example. At that level, at the slaughterhouse as well, the contaminants could enter through the knife or through unhygienic conditions. It could be a lot of reasons. So harvesting is another stage where at which the food contaminants can enter. And then there is the stage of processing. So processing is a broad term. It could easily involve cutting, it could involve shredding, it could involve an entire process in a food factory, and at any stage contaminants could enter, and that is why processing is also a stage that is needed to be monitored. After that, storage. So now people might be thinking that why storage? Because even if storage, see, every step in the food supply chain is an opportunity for the contaminants to enter. And so storage is also another important opportunity, or you could say it's an important stage or step. So basically, processing is a huge, it's a huge flow chart. It goes from washing, cleaning, grading, and every step. There are a lot of steps. Okay, so if for example, if food directly moved from farm to our plates, the supply chain would become much shorter. But in today's day and age, the supply chain is very much complex, because maybe it is starting from Kashmir, then maybe let's take the example of apples, and apples are loaded into the trucks. So trucks are carrying those apples, and maybe somewhere in middle, somewhere maybe in, there's a factory or a plant, and they are cleaning the potatoes or shredding the potatoes, or they are removing the seeds of the potato. So maybe some equipment is coming in contact, and when the supply chain becomes long and it becomes complex, it increases the opportunity for the contaminants to enter into the supply chain. So of course, storage is there, and then transportation I just briefly touched upon, and then distribution. So transportation and distribution are connected, but not exactly the same, because transportation is supposed to take a food product from one place to another. It could be from factory to the distributor, and then the distributor is, for example, a wholesale retailer or something like that. Maybe it is distributing the food products to a mall or a shop or some retailers, or directly to the consumers in some cases. So this is just one small example of a supply chain. The supply chain can be as complex, because I'm assuming that this is just only at a farm level, or not a farm level, this is only at a national level. But if, let's say, someone is importing the food or someone is exporting the food, maybe USA wants to have our onions, the Indian onions. Okay, so if we are exporting our onions, or maybe we are importing some kind of food product, so that also makes the food supply chain more complex, and it increases the opportunity for food contaminants to enter into the food supply chain. And that is why I have mentioned briefly over here that globalization is the enhancer of what? Enhancer of increasing the risk of entering, or increasing the risk of contaminants being entered into the food. So that is why globalization is basically an enhancer, because now in this day and age, you must have observed that we are able to have chocolates from USA, or we can import oil from France or Italy, or olives, for example. Are olives from Spain or from France? So basically, globalization makes the process more complex. It makes the supply chain more complex, more long, and the longer the supply chain is, the higher the chances of food contamination are. And that means we need to have more stringent rules and regulations, more control measures, so that we can catch the hazard, so that we can catch the contaminant or a microbe if that is present in the food sample. Okay, now back to the definition of food safety. So yeah, why we are still here, why it's important, because I think first of all it's important to understand the groundwork, that why is it important. And it's not just about the public health, but if, let's say, you are starting a food company, okay, maybe you are trying to manufacture spices, and for some reason some microbe enter into your spices, or some kind of contaminant enters into your spices, and these spices are consumed by the consumers, and they consume it, and it causes them some kind of disease which is irreparable, or it simply causes death. And in that case, now you may have not heard as much about death being caused from a contaminant, but there have been a lot of cases. And in those cases, what happens, it impacts the export, it impacts the import. For example, if I'm importing some kind of food, or maybe I'm exporting some kind of food to, let's say, Europe, some country in Europe, and they say that, hey, this is not as per our standards. So the entire consignment, because I'm not going to send 1 or 2 kilos to Europe, I'm going to send hundreds and thousands of kgs, because if I'm sending something, I would want the profit. I won't send it in small bits and pieces, right? So if I export something to Europe, to some country in Europe, and what could happen if they reject it, if it is not as per their standards, the entire consignment has to be brought back. So it involves a lot of losses. It hampers the brand image of my company. And that is what I have mentioned over here, that contaminated food undermines exports. It can also impact tourism, livelihoods, because people could be working in my spice factory. There are a lot of people, and if we incur losses, we may have to fire some workers. So it can also impact livelihoods in that sense as well. I mean, it can impact the consumers. It can also impact the people who are working in a food factory and food handlers, and economic development of a country or of a city, if we can say so. So there are a lot of impacts of food safety. If the food is not safe, it can cause issues of public health, it can cause diseases, it can impact the economic development of a country, it can impact the livelihoods, it can impact imports and exports of a country. And that is why it becomes absolutely important that we understand food safety. And this is not just important for the food technologists to understand, or for the people in the food safety department to understand, but also for the consumers to understand, which we are going to talk about in a bit. So now let's talk about what is food safety. We talked about why is it important, because I thought the groundwork is important, but now let's talk about what is actually food safety. So in layman terms, food safety is basically to ensure that the food is safe for human consumption. If I am trying to consume some food, it should be safe. It should not cause any kind of harm, because that is what food is supposed to be. It's supposed to provide me energy. It's supposed to provide me nutrition. It's supposed to, fill my stomach, basically, in layman terms, in very simple terms. So it should be safe for a human consumption. It should not cause any kind of harm. So that is what is intended. But if we talk about the technical definition, what is the technical definition? So as per the FSS Act, and this is important, food safety is defined as assurance that food is acceptable. Okay, the food is acceptable for human consumption according to its intended use. And you might observe that I have underlined intended use. Why is it that so? And what is FSS Act? If you are, for example, maybe studying it for the first time. So FSS Act is Food Safety and Standards Act. And why I have mentioned 2006? People who have already studied it, maybe you can comment down below why 2006 specifically, and why not 2011, or why not 2013, 15, it could be any year, but why 2006 specifically? Okay, so that is your homework. So as per the FSS Act, so this is an act, Food Safety and Standards Act, and as per this act, the technical definition is assurance that the food is acceptable. So if I am consuming a food, and maybe there's a food product, on that food product it is mentioned that this product should be consumed twice a day. Maybe it's a nutraceutical, okay, or maybe it's a capsule. So it is recommended, it has been mentioned that please check with your physician before you consume it. So they have specified the use, the intended use. If someone has said that you don't have to consume this for more than 2 glasses in a day, so that is the intended use. If I consume more than 2 glasses, if it mentions that you only have to consume 2 glasses, if I consume 4 glasses, then that was not the intended use. And if I get ill, or maybe there's some kind of disease that happens to me, that is the responsibility of the consumer. Isn't that so? Because the consumer should have read the food label. I mean, that's an opinion, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. But coming back to the definition, the safe food, if the food is safe, if someone is saying that, hey, this food is safe, it should not cause any harm, and given that there is some kind of intended use. So intended use is basically on the label of the food product, if it is mentioned that you have to consume it in a particular way, and if you are not consuming that product in that particular way, then that can cause some kind of disease. I mean, in some cases, I mean, not in all cases, but you have to consume it according to the intended use. If you don't consume it according to the intended use, it could cause some kind of harm. It could. Okay, there is some probability. There is some risk associated. Okay, so that is the technical definition. And what does it include? What does it involve? So food safety involves handling. We are handling the food. Maybe we are plucking the food, or maybe we are cleaning the food, preparation of the food product. So that doesn't need any explaining, and storage of food in ways that prevent foodborne illness. Okay, we want to prevent foodborne illness. That is our main issue, because the end consumer, he or she should not be harmed. We want to protect that consumer if we are, responsible for processing food. So anyone who is involved with the handling or with the preparation or with the storage of food must understand food safety, because if they don't handle the food properly, it could cause foodborne illness. And that is why these aspects: handling, preparation and storage. These are aspects of what? These are aspects of food safety. So whenever we are studying food safety, there are some kind of considerations that are involved in food safety. So what are those considerations? These considerations are origins of food. And why are we talking about those considerations? We are talking about those considerations because food safety is basically multi-sectoral. It is multidisciplinary. It is not just present in a silo. We can't say that this is a pencil and this is only food safety. But actually food safety is like a web. Okay, it's like a web. There are different nodes attached to it. So we have to understand all those different nodes. Okay, so we have to understand where was food originated. Because see, just as I mentioned over here, that the food contamination could enter at each of those stages, at any of those stages. Okay, because as long as the supply chain is, the contaminant can enter into any stage. Okay, it could enter at the production level, at the processing level, at the harvesting level, at storage level, etc., etc. Okay, so we have to understand that where was food originated. If we are able to understand where food was originated, we can trace the contaminants. Because in a lot of cases, let's say a potato is grown and potato is directly supplied to the consumer, and the consumer still gets ill for some reason. It is a possibility, or it should be possible, that the contaminant can be traced back to the farm. And I think in some countries it is possible that you can trace even the vegetables and the fruits from its farm, so that we can test the soil. There are some soil assessments, there are some water assessments, so that we understand that maybe was that the fertilizer that caused that contaminant, or that caused that illness, or maybe there was some contaminant, maybe there was excessive lead present in the water. So we have to do that. We can do that if we understand origins of what? Origins of food. Okay, so the second is food labeling. So food labeling, for example, if the producer is trying to hide or trying to conceal some kind of ingredient that is present in the food and they are not talking about it, then that is not fair use, because as per the law there are some mandatory requirements. Food labeling is a completely different unit. I think we are going to talk about that in the upcoming videos, but on the label you have to talk about certain things. If let's say there is trans fat, you have to declare that there is trans fat, or now there is a limitation on trans fat as well, that it has to be lesser than some percentage. Maybe it was 0.5 or 0.02. I forgot about it, but food labeling has to be a part of food safety. That has to be a consideration. And food hygiene, whenever we are preparing food, and this not only involves the big food factories, but it also involves when we are preparing the food at our homes. Our hands should be clean, our nails should be trimmed, and in the food factories, the food hygiene system is a little bit more sophisticated. They are wearing a hairnet, and they are wearing gloves, they are wearing a mask, so that the hair doesn't fall off. So food hygiene is also an important consideration when we are studying food safety. And then food additives and contaminants. So contaminants, I just talked about that these are not the desirable substances. They can cause illness, they can cause some diseases, they can even in the worst case scenarios they can cause death. So I just talked about contaminants. But why food additives? So food additives, if they are added beyond the limit, the desired limit, the limit that is allowed by FSSAI or by the law, it can also cause some kind of damage. Okay, it can also cause some kind of illness. There is a potential, there is a probability. I'm not saying that in all the cases, if you, let's say 5 gram was allowed, a particular food additive, and you add 5.1 gram, so there is a particular range. So, okay, so it can be a little bit, depending on the food product or depending on the food additive, it can be specified within a range. But if it is added in excess quantity, there is a probability or there is a risk associated with that particular food additive. So that is why we added food additives over here. And under the food safety, we are also going to consider some policies on biotechnology. Now, biotechnology is whole another monster, and I try not to delve into it, but if it is, it is covered under extensive detail, I will definitely get into it. I will definitely talk about biotechnology in the upcoming videos. But of course, as soon as biotech comes in my mind, GMOs pop up. Okay, so GMOs, or for example, that is, what are GMOs? Genetically modified organisms. Okay, GMOs. So GMOs have a standard, and I think there was a recent draft on GMOs by FSSAI. You can check that out as well. GMOs, or the drafts, the regulations related to that, or the policies on biotechnology, what can we involve, what is safe for the consumers, all of that is considered a part of food safety. Okay, guidelines for management of import and export. Okay, so how are we importing, how are we conducting the trade as well, because whenever we are importing some food products or a consignment is important, there is a entire procedure by the food imports department. It could be a state food safety department, or it could be designated to FSSAI. And whenever a consignment is received, first of all they test the sample. There is an entire procedure that they have to follow. So these policies, the import policies and the export policies, they also come under food safety, the guidelines for management of import and export. And then finally, inspection and certification systems for foods. So inspection and certification system, what are those? Whenever we are consuming a food product, a packed food product, you must have seen the FSSAI logo if you are from India. Okay, or in some cases we also see the ISO mark. We can also talk about that in the future. So ISO could be 9001, that represents that this is a quality product, 9001. And then there are different versions of ISO. It could be 14,000, it could be 22,000. 22,000 is important from the aspect of food safety, that is Food Safety Management System, FSMS 22,000. So inspection and certification bodies and inspection and certification systems for foods are also important, because for example, let's say this pencil is in my hand, and that is why I'm again and again taking the example of pencil. Let's say this is a food product, okay, and this is a food product. If I am trying to sell it to someone, so how will that person, how will that consumer have some kind of trust that this is going to be safe? So only if we have some kind of logo. For example, we have the Apple Pencil logo over here. I'm not sure if you can see, but yeah, maybe you can see. So we have the Apple Pencil logo over here, and that is how I know that okay, this is genuine. Similarly, on a food product, there has to be some kind of inspection done, some kind of certification system, or it should be certified. The packed product should be certified by some kind of organization, and this organization, or you could say this institution or this body, is basically FSSAI in most of the cases. In some cases we also see AGMARK, AGMARK, AGMARK. In some cases we see BIS, ISO, I just talked about briefly. These are entire chapters, so don't worry, we are going to talk about them in the future. This is supposed to be a summary, so I'm not diving deep into those aspects. But inspection and certification systems, these are also the considerations under food safety. Okay, now finally, food safety, it's not just about the government, it's everyone's responsibility. And why I say everyone's responsibility, isn't that supposed to be government's responsibility? Isn't food safety supposed to be Food Safety and Standards Authority of India's responsibility? Of course it is their responsibility, but it's not only their responsibility, it is also the responsibility of the producers, the people who are producing food, the people who are harvesting food, the people who are running food factories, okay, people in the industry. It is also the responsibility of the people in academia. So I have written over here in short. So IND is industry, PROD is producers, ACAD is academia. Okay, it's academia. So why academia? You might be thinking that what do professors, students, research scholars, and PhD scholars, these people what are these people supposed to do? So basically, they also have a responsibility. For example, if someone is teaching, I am teaching you about food safety, it is my responsibility to talk about it legitimately, to talk about it honestly, to talk about it openly. Okay, If there is a research scholar, if he or she is researching more about a particular contaminant, it is their duty, it is their responsibility that if they are researching on that particular contaminant, they research about it honestly and then they share it with the scientific community so that it can help others to research about different aspects, and it can also help the consumers as well. I mean, that is supposed to be the essence of science is basically not just to be circulated amongst the scientific community, but also to help the consumers as well. So academia also plays a role. And then we have consumers. So it's not cons, it's actually consumers. And now you might be thinking, what do consumers have to do? I mean, aren't you trying to make food safe for the consumer? So what do I have to do if I'm just a consumer? And mind you, every single person is a consumer. If, of course, everyone is consuming food, right? So what role do consumers have to play? So consumers are basically, whenever they are purchasing food, right, it is their responsibility to read the food label. It is their responsibility to only buy the food that they actually need. A lot of people buy surplus amount of food, and sometimes it is expired, it gets spoiled if it is perishable. Okay, so it is their responsibility to store the food properly, to prepare the food hygienically, to purchase the food not mindlessly. Be aware of the food label. Try to understand what is written in the food label. Try to understand if a food company is trying to sell you something, and on their, for example, someone says that this food product is very healthy for you, okay, and on the food product you see that there is a lot of sugar, there is a lot of carbohydrates, and there is an indication that they are maybe trying to fake a claim. Okay, there are a lot of companies who would try to give you some fake claims, and they would try to hide some kind of ingredients that are present in the food product. So it is the responsibility of the consumer to understand what is written on the food label. Okay, you just have to flip the product and then read it. We'll also make a video on how to read the food label. That can be an interesting video. But yes, that was it for today, and it felt like it should have been more concise, but okay, that's fine, that's completely fine. We could do with that. This was a summary of food safety. This was supposed to be a summary. I hope this added some kind of value, and if you want me to continue this series on food safety, FSS Act and regulations, do let me know in the comment section. I'm getting a little bit rusty. I haven't made a video in a while, and that is why I have been stammering, but I'll get back into it. I'll get back into form hopefully, and I will see you next time. Class dismissed.